Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive into Beowulf. Now, if you're a literature student, this one's for you. We're going to explore this epic poem in a way that'll make those late-night study sessions way more interesting.
You know, it's amazing how Beowulf, it's not just some old story, it's like a window into a whole other world. You know, fierce warriors and creatures and these values that still matter today, even for lit students.
Okay, so let's get started. First things first for anyone who needs a refresher. What is this epic poem actually all about?
Beowulf's an epic poem, written in Old English, and it's over 3,000 lines long. It's a cornerstone of English lit, and gives us a glimpse into early Germanic culture and these heroic legends.
So picture this. You're back in like 5th or 6th century Scandinavia, mead halls, warriors, kings. But then there's like this darker side, and that's where our story starts.
Definitely a world where monsters roam. We're talking Grendel, this terrifying creature that's terrorizing King Hrothgar's mead hall hero.
Whitney Mead Hall. Can you explain that?
Of course. Imagine like a grand hall, a central gathering place, where the king and his warriors, they feast, they drink mead, they celebrate their victories. It's a symbol of community and strength. So when Grendel attacks Heorot, it's not just like a physical attack, it's an attack on the whole kingdom.
Okay, now those are some high stakes. So where does Beowulf fit into all of this?
Beowulf, this young warrior known for his strength and courage, he hears about Hrothgar's troubles and sails across the sea to help. He's like the classic epic hero.
I'm guessing this is where things get interesting. What happens when Beowulf goes head-to-head with Grendel?
It's a huge battle. Beowulf, confident in his strength, decides to fight Grendel with his bare hands. Brutal fight. And Beowulf rips off Grendel's arm.
Whoa, talk about a powerful image. So this victory, what does it say about Beowulf? Is he just like a warrior with brute force?
Well, that's what's interesting about Beowulf. He's strong. Yeah, but he's also driven by this deep sense of justice and a desire to protect people. He's not just a warrior, he's a leader. Someone who steps up when others are afraid. And as the story unfolds, he eventually becomes king. And his responsibilities, they just get bigger.
But wait, there's more, right? Grendel had a mother. And I'm guessing she wasn't too happy?
You're right. Grendel's mother. Driven by vengeance, she's an even fiercer opponent. This time the battle takes place in her lair, this dark and watery cave. Adds a whole other level of symbolism.
Okay, so we've got these epic battles and this larger-than-life hero. But what about the deeper meaning? What are some of the themes lit students should be looking for in Beowulf?
Beowulf is packed with themes that are as relevant today as they were centuries ago. Loyalty, honor, the struggle between good and evil. But it also grapples with these bigger questions about mortality, fate, and the inevitability of change.
So it's not just a monster-bashing good time.
Absolutely not. Beowulf makes you think about what it means to be a hero, how to face your fears, and how even the greatest warriors eventually have to face death.
Now, before we go too far, let's talk about the historical context. You mentioned earlier that Beowulf offers a window into early Germanic culture. But how much of this world is based on real history?
That's a question scholars have debated for years. While Beowulf himself isn't mentioned in other historical sources, some of the characters, the clans, and even certain events, they have intriguing parallels to actual Scandinavian history and legend.
Wait, really? So some of this fantastical world might actually be grounded in reality?
Exactly. For example, the Mead Hall Heorot. That description could be based on real archaeological sites. It's a reminder that Beowulf, even with its fantastical elements, is rooted in a real historical context.
Okay, I'm already seeing how Beowulf can be so fascinating for lit students. But there's one more thing I'm curious about. How did this poem even survive all these centuries? I read somewhere that the manuscript was almost lost to a fire.
You're right. The Beowulf manuscript, it's known as the Knoll Codex. It's a single fragile document that was damaged by fire back in the 18th century.
Wow, it's amazing it survives it all.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the manuscript and what it reveals about how the poem might have been composed?
Well, the manuscript suggests that Beowulf was written down sometime between 975 and 1025 AD. But there's a debate about whether it was originally passed down orally, told and retold by poets before being written down.
That's incredible. We've got a single manuscript that survived a fire, a story steeped in history, and a hero who battles monsters and faces his own mortality. I can already see why Beowulf has captivated readers for centuries.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover in terms of the poem's structure, its language, and its lasting impact on literature.
You definitely got my attention. Let's dive deeper into those aspects after a quick break.
One of the things that makes Beowulf so fascinating for literature students is how the poet weaves together all these different elements of storytelling.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about how the poem is structured. It's not just a straightforward retelling of Beowulf's adventures. There are all these digressions woven throughout the narrative.
Digressions, you mean like those side stories or historical anecdotes that seem to kind of pop up out of nowhere?
Exactly. And at first glance, they might seem like random tangents, but they actually serve a really important purpose. They add depth and context and give us glimpses into this broader world beyond Beowulf's actions.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these digressions could be important for understanding the whole poem. Can you give me an example?
Absolutely. There's this passage called The Lay of the Last Survivor, and it reflects on the nature of glory and the inevitability of loss. Now, it might seem like a detour from the main action, but it actually foreshadows Beowulf's own fate and adds this layer of melancholy to his victories.
Wow, that's so clever. It's like the poet is subtly layering in these extra levels of meaning. But you know what else I find really interesting about Beowulf? The way it handles the clash between paganism and Christianity. It was written down when Christianity was spreading, but the story itself is set in this pagan world.
That's one of the most fascinating aspects of Beowulf, especially for literature students. It's this incredible blend of pre-Christian beliefs and Christian values. You see references to weird, this concept of fate or destiny from the pagan worldview, but you also see hints of a Christian understanding of good and evil, especially in the portrayal of Grendel as a descendant of Cain.
So the poem is sort of caught between these two worlds. How do you interpret that as a literature student?
You could see it as a reflection of the complex cultural landscape of Anglo-Saxon England at the time. Christianity was taking root, but remnants of older pagan beliefs still lingered. Beowulf might be capturing that sense of transition, the uneasy coexistence of these different worldviews.
It's like the poem is wrestling with these big questions about faith destiny and what it means to be good or evil in a changing world. I'm starting to see why Beowulf is so much more than just a simple hero's journey.
Exactly. And you know what else adds to its richness? The poetry itself. It's not just about the story. It's about how the story is told.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. As a literature student, I'm always looking for those layers of meaning and artistry. So tell me, what should I be paying attention to when it comes to the poem's form and style?
Beowulf is written in alliterative verse, which is a hallmark of Old English poetry. It's all about the repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of words, and it creates this incredible sense of rhythm and emphasis. And then there are the kennings.
Wait, kennings, remind me, what are those again?
Kennings are those metaphorical compound words or phrases that Old English poets love to use. They add these layers of imagery and meaning to the poem.
Right, like whale road to describe the sea or ring giver for a king. They're like little poetic puzzles.
Exactly. They force you to think about familiar things in new ways. Kennings were also a common feature of oral poetry, helping the Scots or poets remember their lines and create a sense of artistry.
See, this is what I love about literature. Even the technical aspects of a poem like Beowulf can be so fascinating. It's like a glimpse into a whole different way of thinking about language and storytelling.
I completely agree. And if you really want to appreciate Beowulf, it's worth taking the time to savor the language, the alliteration, or the kennings, because it's all part of the poem's magic.
All right, so we've covered the plot, the characters, the themes, the historical context, and even the technical aspects of the poem. But I think there's one big question we still need to address. Why should we still care about Beowulf today? Especially in the 21st century. Why is it still considered such an important work of literature?
That's the million-dollar question, and honestly, there are many answers. On a basic level, Beowulf is just a great story, full of adventure, suspense, and these larger-than-life characters.
I mean, who doesn't love a good monster battle?
Right. But it's more than just entertainment. Beowulf also offers us this unique perspective on a world that's both familiar and strangely alien.
It's like time travel, but with words.
I love that. And beyond that, Beowulf continues to inspire writers and artists even today. Its themes of heroism, loyalty, and the struggle against evil are timeless, and they resonate just as strongly now as they did centuries ago.
I mean, you see Beowulf popping up everywhere in books, movies, video games. It's definitely left its mark on our culture.
Absolutely. But its influence goes way beyond pop culture. Beowulf has helped shape our understanding of the English language and English literature. It's a foundational text, and studying it can deepen our appreciation for how stories have been told and retold across time.
So Beowulf isn't just some relic of the past. It's a living, breathing work of art that continues to speak to us today. It's mind-blowing to think about how this one poem has had such a lasting impact. But let's bring it back to our listeners, especially those literature students tackling Beowulf for the first time. Any advice for them?
I think the most important thing is to remember, you're stepping into a world so different from our own. Don't get bogged down in trying to understand every single detail of like Anglo-Saxon culture or history. Focus on the big picture, the narrative arc, the characters, the themes, and the poetic techniques.
So don't sweat the small stuff. Focus on the heart of the story.
Exactly. And pay close attention to the language. Savor the alliteration, the kennings, the way the poet uses words to paint these vivid images and evoke emotions. It's a language that's rich with symbolism and metaphor.
It's like a treasure hunt, unearthing those hidden meanings within the words.
I love that analogy. And remember, Beowulf has been interpreted in so many ways over the centuries. Don't be afraid to develop your own reading of the poem. Explore what resonates with you. There's no single right answer.
That's the beauty of literature, right? It invites us to think critically and engage with the text on a personal level. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Beowulf, what's one thing you hope our listeners take away from this epic journey?
I think it's this. Beowulf is more than just an ancient text. It's a living story that still has so much to teach us about courage, about facing our fears, about the power of community, and about the inevitability of change and loss. It's a story that in many ways is still being written today through the countless works it's inspired.
Beautifully said. Beowulf is a true testament to the enduring power of storytelling. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll continue exploring the rich world of Beowulf on your own. Who knows what treasures you might uncover?